Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Starting Small, a podcast about brand development, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the modern world. In this episode, I'm joined by Max Temkin, co-founder of Cards Against Humanity and many other games. Listen as we talk about the development of one of the top adult party games on the market. Hello, and welcome to the Starting Small podcast. Today I'm joined by Max Temkin. He is the co-founder of Cards Against Humanity. Max, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to go a little bit into the pre-origin story of Cards Against Humanity and go into your grade school days. So this is actually where you met your co-founders in grade school in Chicago. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. And that was around elementary and middle school days is when you initially became friends with your 7 other co-founders.
Yes.
So what was school like for you back then? Was there clubs, sports, band, etc.?
Oh boy. What was school like? I don't know. We all went to we went to great schools. We grew up in the suburbs, and it was I don't know how old you are. We're all like in our like early 30s. So we grew up in the 90s. So
I'm 20.
Yeah. Okay. So we grew up in the 90s. So I think it was different. Like we grew up in the 90s, and it was this very like end of history feeling. I think in America, and it was like, I don't know. It was sort of like. It was a time when it felt like the world was done, when it was like all these sort of world historical events had already happened, and now people would just sort of go to shopping malls and do home improvement projects, and that would sort of be your life. And I always thought that had like a kind of a despair to it. But I don't know. That's like a, obviously like a like a well explored subject in like American media is like that growing up in the like I don't know, whatever, quiet desperation of growing up in the suburbs in the 90s.
For sure.
And then the only other sort of like noteworthy thing that happened while we were in school was in our freshman year of high school was 9/11, and that was like a real. That was a real shift in like what it felt like to be in America and art and popular culture and all of that kind of stuff. So
For sure.
that that was kind of a turning point. And for me, that also got me. It was 9/11. Then it was the war in Iraq. Really got me interested in politics. Probably for the rest of my life.
Okay. And this is actually what you went into school for. You went into school for economics side, which is at Michigan University, correct? And you guys graduated in 2005. Well, you did at least.
No, none of that is right.
Oh.
Yeah, but I went to.
Okay, I'm gonna edit that out.
No, no, you gotta leave it in.
Okay, I'll leave it in.
No, this is good radio.
Thank you.
This is good. That's good podcasting. No, I went to a small school in Baltimore called Goucher College.
Okay.
And some of the other guys, no one went to Michigan though. I don't know where Michigan came from. Some of the guys went.
Wild.
Josh went to. Where the hell did Josh go? Stanford. Ben went to. Ben and Eli went to Brown. A couple of the guys went to Northwestern. So everyone kind of went to good schools except for me. And then I picked my school because when I went to do the visit, someone offered me weed. So I picked the school because I knew that was the one where I would be able to find weed at.
Where was this? Chicago?
No. It's a small school in Baltimore. But I wound up.
Okay.
Yeah, but it wound up being like. It wound up being an awesome school for me. It was a very small school, 1,500 kids, and I got involved in student government, which was pretty cool. I made my first game, and I started working on games with my friends
Sweet.
at school there. So I made this game, Humans versus Zombies, and I played that the first year that I went, and then I helped organize it after that, and that was an awesome experience. And then, I don't know. I never had, I didn't, prior to sort of like being in college and making games and stuff like that, I didn't really like school. I didn't really like any of the responsibilities that were put on me. I didn't really enjoy like working hard on stuff. This is probably a pretty I think this is like got to be a pretty common experience for people. But yeah, I wasn't sort of like into working this whole system.
Okay.
And I didn't feel like it had much for me. And then when I got to college and we were like making games and people were getting really excited about them, and it was like, it felt like it was this it was like our thing. Like there was no one else who was telling us to do it or responsible for it. and the only sort of limit of how good it would be was how hard we worked on it. That was a really good lesson for me, because like that was the lesson that I took away from that. And I think this was something I learned from just going to a small school, is like it generally does not take much to work much harder than the people around you if you care about something.
For sure.
And then it's just sort of like picking good things to care about.
Yeah. So where did this desire to create games come from? Like Humans versus Zombies in your college days, was there a club that you joined, or your friends around you, did they also do this?
No, this was prior to a time. So let's see, this would have been in 2005 was when we all started college. So this was prior to a time when there was a club for game design, when you could major in game design. I mean, game designer was not really a well-known word in the sort of like cultural lexicon. This was before the sort of like indie games revolution. It was before XBLA. It was before you could like really, for the most part, it was before you could like sort of download people's homemade games in your home. I mean,
Yeah.
there was certainly like a weird. I always had, when I was a kid, I was interested in this weird community of like Mac shareware games, and that was a neat little area. And I mean, it's not like it was zero, but it was very, very, very niche. Certainly, no one was making any money doing this stuff. And no, so my freshman year, these two guys who went to school with me, Brad Sappington and Chris Weed, who wound up becoming great friends, started this game of, they had basically had Nerf guns, and they thought it would be really funny to see 50 kids chasing one kid across the quad, and they were like, that would be a really fun thing. I think they had also played some Assassins like before I had gotten to school, and basically it was too hard to organize people.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of like overhead to do a game of Assassins. And so they created this game of zombie tag, and it was a totally like original invention. And a bunch of their friends were computer science majors, and so they created this sort of like very rudimentary website that would like track who was a human and who was a zombie. And I played the first semester of my first year of college, and it just felt like the most fun and important thing I'd ever done in my life. Like you're just like running through the woods trying to get to class. Like another thing was like it helped me make friends and like genuinely like make connections and meet people that I wouldn't have otherwise met. And I also like learned my way around the school, because you're like learning all these weird back passages and steam tunnels and little shortcuts and things. And I was just like, this is the greatest thing. And you just felt, I mean, I don't know if you've ever played one of these, like, I don't know, maybe like paintball. I've never really done like serious paintballing, but I think
One time I have.
it's like probably a similar kind of experience of like, you just feel so alive. Like it's just I don't know. It was a really, really special experience. And so that just got me excited. And so then I just started working with them on the sort of subsequent games and help them organize it for the rest of the time that I was at school. And by the time, and then I had also been working on, been working on political campaigns. And in 2008, I left college for a year to go work on the Obama presidential campaign. And so I was sort of learning all this stuff of like, how to make websites and how to communicate things to people online and do this sort of like, I don't know, maybe like grassroots organizing online. That was all really, really new and also sort of being invented and in that era. And so I was like, well, we should, it would be cool to have more people playing Humans versus Zombies and using our software. And, we still really haven't ever made any money on it. It's really just a free thing that we thought was cool. But by the time we graduated, it was being played at over 700 colleges and universities on almost every continent, including libraries, military bases, summer camps.
It's amazing.
It just became this huge phenomenon. And then the other thing, and it also sort of was at the same time as this huge zombie craze in popular culture. Now, and I to this day, like I don't know if we were riding the coattails of a zombie craze, or if we created the zombie craze by having this game out there, or if our game got popular for the same reasons that people get interested in zombies. But it's kind of an interesting thing to think about. But yeah, it was just right place, right time, and this thing just absolutely blew up. And and it's still, I mean, people still play it. I still go, sometimes I speak at a college or something, and, there's like humans versus zombies clubs, or there's
Wow.
LARP clubs or things like that. And yeah, it's cool. It's neat to have made something like, and it's also neat to be validated of like, I saw this thing. No one had ever done this game before. And Christian Brad just sort of came up with it, and I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever. This is the coolest experience I've ever had in my life, and it's cool to have been a part of then figuring out how to like give that to so many other people. So,
For sure.
and the final piece of it that's kind of cool. There's two other sort of pieces of fallout from this, which was kind of cool. Is this too long? You don't care about
No,
this?
no, not at
Okay.
all. Not at all.
The other
I'm
kind
enjoying
of
this.
two pieces of fallout of humans versus zombies were, one, it was like this real crash course in game design, because at the time there really was not very many resources out there about game design. I mean, game design was not really like a vocation. Like there weren't a lot of like books. Like it's just like it's now it's normal that like kids would go to school and study game design. That was absolutely not a thing
Yeah.
in 2005. So we just figured it out, man. Like we would have a problem in the game, and then we'd sit
Yeah.
there and we'd go, why are people doing this? Well, how do we solve this problem? So like one example was the humans versus zombies. It's like everyone starts as a human. One player is the original zombie, and they run around and tag the humans and turn them into zombies. And the humans defend themselves with Nerf guns. And it's this crazy, immersive, frenetic, 24-hour game of tag that happens like everywhere you go. It's crazy. We at the peak at our school, we had almost 2/3 of the school playing. So it was just everywhere you
Wow.
like. You'd go to the cafeteria, you'd go to class. Like it was awesome. And the humans would get super organized, and they'd create a caravan where they'd all walk to class together to protect each other. Like, and the zombies would get up early, and they'd get up in the trees, and they'd drop out of the trees and try and tag the humans. Like,
That's
it
hilarious.
was awesome. It was so cool.
Yeah.
But basically, the humans at one point figured out that the zombies had like a starve timer. They had to eat a human every, I think, 48 hours, or they would starve. And so the humans eventually figured out that they could sort of break the game if they just camped in their dorm room. And so some people had like on-campus apartments, and they would cram into these on-campus apartments where they had like kitchenettes and bathrooms, and they'd prepare all their meals, and they'd skip class, and they'd never leave their apartment. And they were just like, we'll just never leave, and then the zombies can never tag us, and we'll just wait out the starve timer. That was a big problem. So that was where the sort of like crash course in game design came in. So we would sit around and we go, why are they doing that? Like, that's not fun. Like, we want them to play, it's fun to go out and have to protect yourself and make a plan and all that. And so then we go, how do we get them from not having fun to having fun? And we were like, okay, we're going to create missions that the humans have to do. And so we'd put glow sticks in the woods, and we'd be like, you have to go retrieve these beacons. And then by the time we graduated, at one point I was trying to, my senior year, I remember we wanted to land a helicopter on campus. So we wanted to have the humans have to go to this drop point, and a helicopter would land and drop off a supply crate that they would then have to bring from one location to another. And I had like gone so far as to file the flight plans with the helicopter, and at some point it became apparent that we needed permission from the school, and I wound up in this meeting in the president of the school's office, and they were so mad, and they were like, you want to do what? And we were like, we want to land a helicopter. And this guy had previously, in his previous career, been a journalist, and he saw, I guess, some guy who he worked with got his head cut off by the rotors of a helicopter, and he's like, you're absolutely not landing this thing on our campus. So,
Oh my gosh.
anyway, it was like this. It was just a great crash course in like problem solving and game design, and like I didn't sign up to go to school to do that, and also that wasn't a class that I took. It just was. It was like that was what we did after class, or like on weekends, was we'd like sit around and come up with missions and solve problems and write code, and like it was cool. It was a really probably like the luckiest thing that's ever happened in my life, that I was like at that place at that time with those people, and that I got to be a part of that. And then the other nice twist that came out of that was, by the time we graduated, this thing had gotten a lot of national media, and we were on the Colbert Report, and it's like it got blew up quite a bit. And so we started getting some academics started inviting us to like game conferences, to like independent like game conferences. And so we gave some talks, and we went to these festivals and organized Humans versus Zombies at festivals. And that was also it was just one of those things of like just right place at the right time, because I met all these really cool people who were also graduating college into a recession and didn't really have jobs. And they
Yeah.
were like, maybe we could make games, and that would be like being an artist. And that was a really cool indie games in 2010 is like, being an oil painter in Florence in the 1700s. It's just like you were there for that really special moment of creativity.
For sure. So how was it with this game? How was it with the professors and the campus? Because this was a 24-hour game.
Yes. So the classroom buildings and stuff were safe zones, so the game
Okay.
couldn't proceed in the classroom buildings. But the professors, what I would say is the cool professors liked it and thought that it was probably a distraction, but like that it was like quirky and cool and fun and sort of the kind of thing that kids should be doing in college, right? Is like
Yeah, for sure.
weird, performative, over the top games. Like, I mean, yeah, it's just it's Listen, like college, for all of whatever, I don't know, the way that maybe college is depicted in movies, like it is a kind of a drudgery, right? It's like you wake up and you have a routine and you have coffee and you go to class and you do the same thing every day, and like I don't know, like it was very lively. Like people were outside and running around and meeting new people and busting their routines, and like it was cool. I don't know. So the cool professors liked it. The administration, at first they hated it. They didn't understand it. There was a push to ban it, and we sat in a lot of sort of tense meetings where we would have to sort of explain what this was. And that was another case where like it was like really, really good and fortuitous for us that like I had this experience of like working in political campaigns, and I sort of knew how, I don't know, like I knew how to like sit in a meeting and like those are like weird skills to have, right? Like you get hauled in before all these administrators, and like there was one meeting I remember in particular where we were really scared they were gonna ban the game. And there was like the dean of education just hated this thing, hated it, and had made a big push to ban it. And we had a big sort of adjudication with the president of the college and the deans and the provost and I don't know, all these authority figures. And we were all just nauseous, and we sort of could feel it coming. And because of the time I'd spent on political campaigns, I just sort of like had put a little strategy together. So the first thing we did was we had I don't know, is this interesting? We had
for sure.
We had the student paper. I had like a reporter from the student paper. We like tipped them off to the meeting, and we had them sitting outside because we knew that would sort of create this atmosphere of like the decision that they make in this meeting is going to be
genius,
noticed, right? Like, like people are paying attention if they do the wrong thing. And then the other thing was we made an agenda for the meeting. So when everyone sat down, we had paper printed out with like the stuff that we wanted to talk about. It wasn't our meeting. They were like, come to our meeting so we can talk about banning this game. But we just like got out in front of it, and we made a written agenda, and we like distributed, and we were like, here's the topics we'll be discussing in this order. And it sort of gave us control of the meeting so we could present it. Yeah. And the other thing that I thought was really, in retrospect, was just like very savvy was one of their big things was they did not like the toy guns, right? The Nerf guns were frightening. I mean, interestingly, like I actually think the gun debate has become more frightening and changed quite a bit today. But you know, it wasn't 2020 then. It was
totally.
It was sort of this pre-school shooting era. So it was a different politics of it. But the dean was like, these are frightening weapons of murder, and so we were like, I'm glad you brought that up. And we had brought Nerf guns from we just went to Target and got whatever toy Nerf guns for all of the administrators, and we were like, here, we brought you each one of these to play with, so you can decide for yourself if it's a dangerous weapon or not. And these things are like crazy, right? They're like bright orange and pink, and they shoot suction cup darts. And we gave them to everyone, and like the one dean like turned her nose up at it and pushed it away, but all the other administrators, like they had this like inner 7-year-old that came out, and they're like, whoa, neat, cool, and they were like,
that's so funny.
They were like shooting the suction cup darts at each other, and they immediately,
no way.
they immediately like. Got right. It was like in a way that we could never put into words the silliness of these. But anyway, that's I don't know. This is where
It's hilarious. Okay, so in around 2008 and 2009 is when the Cards Against Humanity kind of creation came about. And this
Yeah.
is when you met back up after college with your friends from high school.
Yes.
And who came up with this initial idea?
Yeah,
Probably
so
you with your game creation.
Yeah, so this was something we made while we were in college, and it was just a different group of friends than Humans versus Zombies. This was my like childhood friends, and we when we were home for winter break, we were just sort of nerds, and I don't know, like we didn't have a I'll speak for myself. Like I didn't have a ton of friends. Like this was my friend group, and I was sort of in this nerd group, and we always loved like comedy. We had this like improv. We had this like we started this we had this like comedy club in like a school club that we had started in high school, and we took improv classes together and saw a lot of. We just got comedy nerds, right? We were like, there's like a type of subspecies of nerd that like memorizes stand-up routines, and we all had. Someone had gotten this like George Carlin book as like a bar mitzvah gift, and we all would take it. We would take it to the cafeteria, and we would pass it around and read it to each other, like at the lunch table. Like that is just like the type of nerd we were. And so we did a lot of like comedy, and then we liked games. We liked tabletop games and that kind of a thing, and we liked making our own stuff. And Cards Against Humanity was just like it was just one in a long line of these sort of like dumb games that we would make for ourselves. And this one we made for a New Year's party where we had some friends coming. There were like girls coming, and it was like in someone's like parents' basement, but it wasn't like a raucous party. It wasn't like a drinking party or something like that. It was just like, I don't know, like a party. I don't know. It was like a hangout, and we were like we just made the game, and it was like and we basically the design goal was like we wanted to make something that a big group of people could all play together. And it was just, and we made it on, we ripped up pieces of red and green construction paper, and we like wrote it with like a pen with just like Sharpies, and we all just grabbed handfuls of paper and just wrote down whatever dumb shit we could think of. And we didn't really play test it that much, but it was so funny. It was really, really fun. And then I think that was the first one where we had made a bunch of these, and you know, this was not like the first time we ever made a game or anything, but that was the first one where we like woke up the next morning and we were like, that was pretty good. We should keep working on that. That was very funny.
Yeah, the beauty behind this game is there's not like an ending card amount. Like you guys can continue to add cards. And how was that initial day? Was it like 50 cards and then you just loved it so much you just kept adding?
You know, I don't know. I think that sadly I think that prototype is gone.
Oh.
And I think it was before like the smartphone era. So I don't think there's any like photos of it or anything. But we've had some discussions back periodically, and like I think maybe one of the guys, Ben, thinks he might have some of those original cards. But shortly after that, we made a more of a prototype, and I remember Ben and I had a little. Ben and I are both designers. Like that was sort of what I was doing in campaigns was I was doing like branding and graphic design, and Ben's always been interested in that as well. So we sort of created. We played with a lot of different options back and forth, but we sort of created the look of card, the sort of black and white Helvetica, look of Cards Against Humanity, and there was a lot that was not completely groundbreaking and original. At the time, Art Paul is a Chicago designer who passed away recently, and he had done a lot of really crazy design in Playboy in the 60s and 70s, and that he's always been one of my favorite designers. I had also, coming off of the Obama campaign, like I have been working a lot with this typeface called Gotham, which is sort of a humanist sans serif that's a lot like Helvetica, and I had really I had gotten this real crash course in like working with this typeface, and I knew how to set the letters, and I knew that I understood the mood of what that typeface was about in a way that I had never understood before. And so that was something where once we stumbled Helvetica, I sort of understood and it's hard to, how do you describe it? It's like the feeling of it, right? It's like it's like the overall feeling that we were going for. And then there were a few other people who were, another big one at the time was American Apparel was using a different version of Helvetica for their advertising. I think they were doing like an all caps thing, but it was very funny and cheeky. And then also the IRS, like an IRS form, was also a big design reference for us. So, but we really just, it was like a trial and error of like we kept typesetting all these different phrases and words from the game, and we laid it out, and yeah, that's that. We just went with what was funniest, and we just looked at a lot of different options. And we are like, "Oh, I think it's funnier like that. I think it's funnier like that." And the more sort of stark and official and declarative we made it, the funnier and funnier it got. The contrast of the officialness of this design with the brokenness and absurdity of the cards. And the other huge sort of design decision that I remember Ben and I figuring out at that time was putting a period after all of the white cards.
Okay.
That had to be discovered. That was not obvious. Now there's a ton of these fill in the blank games or whatever. It's like almost like a whole genre of people make these games, and everyone puts a period after. But that was not obvious. Like that's something we had to figure out, and we had a lot of debate about it. We also had a lot of debate over. At one point, the game was all questions with question marks, and then we wanted to do fill in the blank. I was really against that because I was like, I didn't want to lose the sort of poetic nature of these open-ended questions, and I was worried about lengthiness of questions. But we still to this day probably 80 to 90% of the game has moved over to fill in the blank. We do have some open-ended questions, but that also became something that had to be again like discovered and tested and refined over a long period of time.
For sure. Okay, so when you got the game out there and you introduced it to the public, how much of a broad public did you introduce it to? Because you kind of wanted to keep it narrow at first before you...
Oh, there was no we didn't want one thing or another. It was just, I mean, there was no company, there was no business.
Yeah, so it was just a project.
Yeah, it made us laugh.
For sure.
And there was all this internet comedy that we all loved at the time. Like, do you remember like Homestar Runner? Or was that before your time? Strong Bad emails?
Sadly, anyway, before my time.
I feel so old. I feel just ancient. Oh my God.
All right. Man.
Anyway, there was a lot of our comedy stuff that we loved. There was one that you should check them out just so you can see it. But there was like a website. It was like these flash cartoons called Homestar Runner. And just the funniest thing in the world. And these guys just sort of made it for free. It was just online, and they'd put a new one up all the time. And it was just so funny. And it was such a gift. And you know, I still remember going home from school every day and going on Homestar Runner and seeing if there was a new Strong Bad email. Just because it was like, what a gift that like this thing was just out there. And I thought it was, for me, my feeling at least was, it was so much better, so much funnier that it was this free gift. That it was just this thing that you could go, you just go watch, and you didn't have to buy anything or ask your parents' permission or any of that. And so that's just all we ever wanted cards to be, was we just wanted it to make people laugh, and we wanted to play it. We never had a conversation of like we should start a company or anything like that. At one point, we all wrote down on like, because I had been through this with Humans versus Zombies, where we got knocked off and people tried to trademark our name, and we had such stress because we never dealt with it. We like got a legal pad, and we were like, we all made Cards Against Humanity on this date, and we're going to split it evenly. And we all signed our names on the piece of paper. And also,
that's awesome.
Also long gone. No idea where that paper is, but gone. But that was about as much as we thought of it. And the only reason we did that was because I had already been through this like drama with Humans versus Zombies of like, where we just wanted to like put this thing online, but there's people who will take advantage of you basically, and they'll sell T-shirts with your name on it, or you know, whatever.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so we wanted to sort of like establish that, and I think I know it's, you know, we really put that stuff off for a long time. Eventually, we did get our trademarks and copyrights and stuff like that, but our philosophy was sort of to wait until the last possible second on all of that, including like starting a company, forming a company, starting a bank account. Like we didn't do any of that stuff. We just wait on each of those things. We waited until it almost destroyed the project, until it was like critical that we had to go do it. And then we sort of went kicking and screaming every time we professionalized, because it made it less flexible and fun to work on, I guess. But
totally.
Yeah, that was all. It's all we ever wanted. We just wanted it to be online. Like I remember, like I think I was on something. I was very active on Something Awful, these forums back in the day that were very funny, and I posted it there, and it got some traction, and people were saying it was funny, and that was really cool and gratifying, because to me, those were like the funniest people in the world. And so that was neat. There was a very like positive reception on a thread in Something Awful. And then I think there was a thread on Metafilter that blew up that got a lot of attention, and then we started getting invited to some like different game festivals, and we got sort of welcomed into this like indie game scene. And this was before there were really indie video games, let alone like indie board games. So we were very, very early, and that was and we did a Kickstarter, and then started selling games, and then that was, I don't know, a couple years into the project, because at some point, like, we got so many emails and people were like, I don't want to print this at home on my printer, I want to buy it. And so we were like, yeah, it was wild, man. Like we were like Googled like how to make a card game. Like there was no master plan here.
That's awesome. So at first, you guys actually offered the game for free. Like,
yeah,
online.
It's still for free. It's always just a free PDF. Yeah, the game is just a free PDF, and then we also sell it if you want.
Okay, cool. Okay, so around 2009, 2010, you guys joined Kickstarter, which actually, I'm talking to Yancey, the founder, to get him on my podcast. He's a great guy.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Tell Yancey that Max said the podcast was a great experience.
For sure. Thank you so much.
He should do it.
For sure.
Yeah.
And what you guys did is you launched this on Kickstarter, which this is right around the Kickstarter launch when Kickstarter started, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how did you discover this without having much hype around it if it just launched?
Yeah. Again, it's like when I go back and like think of like the story of how these like all these like Lego pieces fit together, like it's so wild, because I think people always, a lot of times if I do an interview, a businessy interview, or people want to know the story of cards or something like that, people are always like, what was the master plan? And like, when did you like figure it all out? I'm like, you have no idea like how contingent it was. Like it literally was just, I mean, like we were all working other jobs. Like this was not there was no plan here, right? It was just like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It was just, this is unbelievable. I'll tell you the story of how we came to Kickstarter, but just unbelievable luck of like how these stars had to line up for this all to happen. So basically, there's a designer. One of the co-founders of Kickstarter is a designer in Chicago named Charles Adler, who is now a dear friend, but I did not know him at the time. And Charles co-worked at a space called One Design.
Okay.
This is prior to starting Kickstarter. I hope I have the story right. And One Design, one of the founders of One Design, is another wonderful designer, Sam Rosen, another good friend of mine. And Sam has a studio mate named Scott Thomas. And Scott was the design director on the 2008 Obama campaign. And when I was an intern on the Obama campaign, I was in all these meetings, and people would be like, oh, we need this website. All right, man, I'm not telling this story good. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Let's start over. All right, here's the deal. Prior to the Obama campaign in 2008, the way that everything worked on presidential campaigns was that they would hire an outside design firm who would make all their stuff. And so if you needed something, you would pay money for it. The Obama campaign did something really cool and really different, which was they in-housed all of their design and digital media. And that was because the campaign knew in 2008, this is going to be different than every presidential campaign that's ever come before it, because we're going to be campaigning on the internet, and we're going to need to make lots of websites and graphics and resources that go online as well as in the real world, and we're going to have to do it in-house.
Yeah.
And they hired what was at the time, it was called the digital media team. And they were these designers, and if you think back of 2008, this very iconic Obama brand, hope, change, the Shepard Fairey portrait of Obama, those colors of blue, never done in my lifetime in politics before. I mean, everyone had some fucking, swoop or something with their name on it, but Obama was really different. It was a really cutting-edge, fresh, and professional design system with unbelievable consistency. And part of the effect that it had this transformational effect in the primary where people forget how crazy it was that Obama ran for president, right? I'm from Chicago, so I've been working I had known of Obama for a long time, worked on his Senate campaign, and that's why I had volunteered really early on the presidential campaign. But it was crazy, dude, that he was running for president, right? Like, for sure. He was in the Senate for 2 years. He's a black guy, like he looks funny. He's got like big ears, and his name was Barack Hussein Obama, and no one had heard it. Like it was nuts. Like that is not the profile of someone who runs for president in 2008. It's just not.
Yeah.
And there's also this idea in the Democratic Party of like having put in your time, and Obama had not put in his time in that way. And he came out of the gate with this design system that was executed so professionally, and it was so fresh and so different that I think that it really helped cement the image of him as this guy who was ready to lead. It made him executive in the way that every time he gave a speech, the podium sign looked exactly right. The signs that the audience was holding up, the set dressing was exactly right. The website was exactly right. It was fresh and professional in a way that was almost like an answer to the incompetence of the Bush administration. And the guy who made that happen was this designer, Scott Thomas, who I knew through, so I met him on the campaign.
Okay.
Scott gave me my first book about design. I mean, I learned all this stuff on the fly. Like, I would just show up in meetings and people would be like, can anyone do this? And I would say, could they be like, can anyone make a sign for us or make a website? And I go, yeah, I could figure that out. I really did not know how to do it, but I would stay up all night and I would Google like how to make a website or whatever.
Yeah.
In retrospect, I can't believe I did that, but it was crazy. But I'd be like, yeah, I know how to do that, and then I just figure it out because I left myself in a position where I couldn't not do it at that point.
For sure.
So yeah, I just figured it out, and at some point I ran afoul of Scott, and Scott was like, what the fuck is this? And this isn't right. And why is this typeface here? And this is that. And I was like, well, I just an intern. Like I'm copying, right? And what I would do is after everyone would leave at, 10 o'clock at night, I would go over to the digital media team, to their desks. I'd walk all the way across the office and go over to their desks. And I would take stuff off their desks that they had made or they were working on. And I'd sit there with a ruler and I would go, why, when I type Obama on my screen, why does it look different than when they have it on this thing? And I'd sit there with a ruler and I'd be like, okay, they're making the letters be a different amount of space apart from each other than I am. And then I would Google, how do you make the letters be a different amount of space apart? And so that was it. That was like, and then eventually Scott gave me some great resources, some books, and he became a real mentor for me. And I've been lucky enough to work on some really cool projects with him. But he started my lifelong interest in design and typography and all this stuff. So, damn. I'm like sailing on the ocean when
No, that's
I'm
really interesting.
sailing on the ocean when I should be on the lake here. Okay, so after the dust settles on all of this, Scott made a book called Designing Obama, and it was an art book of all the crazy shit that we did on the campaign.
Okay.
There's some of my work is in there, the Obama brand, the brand guide, the style guide, all that kind of stuff. It's, to me, if there was a fire in my house and I could only save like a few things, that book is good. You cannot get that book anymore. There's only a few, only so many.
For sure.
And I would take my copy. That's a very, very special thing to me. And Scott made that book on Kickstarter. It was the first time I had ever heard of Kickstarter. It was right after the campaign, and he knew Charles, who was one of the co-founders of Kickstarter, through this round robin of connections, and Scott wanted to make this book. And one of the can I like keep telling this story?
Yeah, keep going.
Is this boring? Okay, sorry. Now I didn't realize how long of a story it would be. So Scott, so one of the like curses of the Obama brand is, if you think of the 2008 Obama brand, there's this like royal blue color.
Yeah.
That's like the Obama blue. That is a notoriously difficult color to reproduce in what's called process color, which means when you mix other colors together to try to get that blue, it turns out sort of brown. And it's a very hard color to get. And we all cared so much on the campaign of getting that blue right. Like, just hours and hours and hours of my life were spent on the phone and working with printers and getting that color as a spot color. And it's a whole thing. But anyway, Scott wanted to make this book. He wanted the book to be, it's a beautiful hardcover book. He wanted it to be bound in cloth, and he wanted the cloth to be that color of blue. And, well, there is no cloth that's color of blue because of how hard it is to get that color. And so he found a place in Japan, a special silk factory in Japan that would make a dye and fabricate the silk to spec so that it would be the right color of blue on the book. And he's talking about this on the Kickstarter, and he's like, I'm doing this Kickstarter and asking you directly for funding for this book because I don't think a publisher would let me go to Japan and work on this silk, and they'd go, well, that's not going to sell more books, so who cares?
Yeah.
But I'm going, well, that's the right thing to do. Like, it has to be the right color of blue. And it was this epiphany for me I was like, that's his art. He's in control of this project. Like, no one can tell him he can't go to Japan and make this silk. And I also saw it as a reflection of the values of the Obama campaign of, like, it's people coming together to do this thing that might otherwise be impossible. And that just stuck with, I saw how cool the book came out. I like went to his office to pick it up when it shipped. It was this really special experience being part of that Kickstarter, and that just stayed with me. And then it was just obvious. It was like a done deal when we needed to make cards. I was like, oh, well, I know this website. And we were one of the very early, this was before there were like board games on Kickstarter. Like we were one of the very early board games on Kickstarter.
Wow.
But it was that, it was just like, dude, when I go back and that particular story of like it is so weird to think of the trajectory of your life and be like,
For sure.
it's because I met that guy and he wanted
That
this
is
blue
so
silk.
crazy.
And isn't it weird to think of like, yeah, and like I don't know what would have happened with cards if there was no Kickstarter, because like at that time also like we weren't going to get published. Like there was no market for adult party games. Like that wasn't a category. There was no like shelf at Target of like party games like cards. Like it just wasn't a thing. Like there was no commercial argument for this thing. Like had we wanted to go get a publisher, we would have been rejected. There's no chance. Like yeah. So
that is so
weird.
crazy.
Isn't that a weird? And it's like, and then he knew the guy who started Kickstarter. Like just it's so weird. Anyway, that's that story.
The network pool you had there was just like phenomenal.
All right.
The Obama campaign starting there, and then all of a sudden these other connections coming from there. That's huge.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so for people who don't really know what Kickstarter is, it's a crowdfunding platform where you set prize-based initiatives. Am I correct?
Oh, everyone knows what Kickstarter is.
Okay. So what did you guys do for your crowd-based initiative? What did you offer?
For our it's just the game. I think there was one reward. It was just like, give us $25 and we'll send you the game.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of simplicity. I like
sure.
simplicity.
I respect that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Cards Against Humanity, it's practically in every aisle or every game aisle of a store that has one, and it's crazy well known right now around the world. And I really respect your story, and thank you so much for sharing it with me. It's really, really inspiring.
Thanks, man.
Max, again, thank you so much.
Yeah, hey, this was fun. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of Starting Small. If you would, leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow Starting Small Pod on social platforms to keep up to date on future guests.